right. Welcome to a special episode of Cloud and Clear with the CEO and founder of Quantum Metric, company we've known now for a couple of years. Please welcome to the stage Mario Ciabarra.
Thanks, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're just discussing the pronunciation of his name and how he uploaded that to LinkedIn and how it's half serious, half joke, but definitely playing tribute to your Italian roots for sure, right?
The Italian roots and probably my personality, which is as we were mentioning earlier, if you can't have a couple laughs while you're building a dragon, I think you're in the wrong line of business. You got to have a good time when you're building this, and I bet you could share a few stories along those lines as well.
Could not agree more. I think that's why we get along so well and why our partnership works. Um, but in this sort of spirit of how small the world is and how quickly it's changing as well, we were just reminiscing that it was actually Whitney Yang who introduced us right after she left Google. She was someone that we were working very closely with at Google Cloud, and to our surprise, she left. But then she ended up at Quantum Metric, and she kind of pulled the teams together almost right away. A couple months after starting, and you came to our headquarters. We met you and a bunch of other executives, and your platform. I remember when you demoed it, definitely left an impression. Like, wow, they're doing something very special. And then fast forward, you guys have raised a bunch of money, seen a bunch of success, and now you're, tightly, integrated and partnered with us and with Google Cloud. Which is, you never know how, the universe is going to bring people back together.
Yeah, it's been exciting. I mean, it's been a long journey. I remember that meeting fairly well. Love your offices, and it's the interconnectedness of people as you go through startups. Just you never know, kind of like where one touch point might lead, and it's been a tremendous journey both with GCP and SADA, and uh, you know obviously don't want to just gush on our podcast and say thank you too many times, but the partnership has been incredible. So thank you to you and team.
I appreciate it. In a lot of ways, we're just getting started. But speaking of, founding companies, this is not your first rodeo at Quantum Metric. I don't know if you're self-described serial entrepreneur, but some people might say that. What I love to talk about always on these shows is, the background and the history and the origin story of my guest, but also, of course, leading up to the foundation and the origin story of Quantum Metric itself. So if you'd indulge us for a few minutes, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I think it starts off with I'm the youngest of six kids. You'll see that in my personality, but you'll see it in my drive. I think as the younger of a larger family, you kind of have to fight. You learned really young to just fight for what you needed. My father immigrated from Italy in his 20s. I think there's a little bit of something special there as well as we look at founder success and you, Tony, from Armenia. My dad from Italy. I just there's something about that first generation that I think I don't know if it's a chip on our shoulder, but we just want to go prove. Well, we just want to go conquer the world. I guess is probably
Yeah.
the best
Yeah.
things to share. And in my early 20s, I had an idea that I saw a challenge around how do you present data in the technology side of the world. It was an early APM play, and it just knocked it out of the park. I always find myself very fortunate that things work out, and I sold that company to a company called CompuWare, who it later acquired Dynatrace to replace it. So I had some great success in the APM space. Um, had some fun in the iPhone world, turned the iPhone into a Wi-Fi hotspot 18 months before Apple did, created the notification center 5 years before Apple did. Really, it's just like it's been for me that really it's that early for the first couple of companies and really the early days here at Quantum. It's been about like how do I create great product. I think one of the most fun parts about my journey at Quantum, like the first three companies were all just a few people big. We've had some outsized success for those few people, but with Quantum, I learned early on as we hit about 15 people that if you want to build a multi-billion-dollar success, you can't get there by just creating great product. It had to be about having great people, and I think I've heard the word, and I know the culture at SADA is fantastic. Or I probably wouldn't be spending a lot of this time with you. I would say at Quantum Metric. what became critical was how do we create a great culture? And we've heard it, and I've said to people like, what does that even mean to create a culture? And about 15 people in, I realized there were attributes of people that I loved, and there's attributes that I just didn't really want to spend time with certain types of people. And I just try to figure out and nail it. And it really came down to three. I think there's a power of three in just nature, and it's passion, persistence, and integrity. Passionate people, they show up to work because they want to be there. And you think about people are scared of remote work, by the way. I don't know. Before the
Right.
pandemic, people were
For
really
sure.
scared of remote work. Now we have no choice, right? But one of the things that leaders, and I think like leaders that just haven't really explored it, they were scared that like, are you going to show up and work when you can be in your pajamas at home, et cetera? Like they
Yeah.
had this thought in the back of your mind. I don't know kind of how it's been at SADA, but for Quantum, we were always a remote team. But in the early days, even of me, I was like, how do I know that people are showing up to work and working hard? And passionate people, I just don't worry. Like I actually worry about the opposite, to be honest. Like I hope you make time for yourself, your family, your friends, because you're so passionate about what you do. This is, it shouldn't just be your only part of your life. And persistence. If you sign up to get something across the finish line, do it. Like I don't want to micromanage or babysit. Like it's not what I signed up for. And I honestly believe that the only difference between success and failure is that people that failed stop trying. Like I'm not perfect and I don't get everything right, but I will get it across the finish line. So I really do believe in that persistence and integrity. I've had people with the first two attributes and they weren't honest with themselves, their peers, our customers. I didn't enjoy it and I didn't want to work with those types of people. And so, um, here at Quantum Metric, we put those values into everything we do. I interview every team member still. We're rounding the corner at 200 team members,
Wow.
and I still interview each one. And my interview, like typically we've already assessed skill sets. They're already a great fit. I want to make sure that they know how important those three attributes are to me, and that they exemplify them as well. So that's a bit of the journey from just my history. And I think what's most important at Quantum is building a culture. I mean, I think that's the CEO, the founder's role is build a great culture, and everything else is sort of fall into place. If you take
Yeah.
care of your people, they'll create great product. They'll make their customers happy, and we'll get all the sales that you want. I think sometimes people are so focused on building the company that they think the opposite. They're like, all right, let's make sure we get new sales. Let's take care of customers. And, kind of people are expendable. We can always get more of those. And I think they might miss out on that massive part of success when they do it that way.
Yeah, no, I think bringing that same philosophy to a product company to me seems pretty refreshing. Um, we've lived in a services world for 20 years. We have a little bit of experience with product stuff that we've done within SADA, but we service we have lots of customers who are product companies themselves. And the ones we get along with the most, I think, have that similar cultural alignment in terms of just customer obsession, etc. But you can't convey customer obsession unless people love working there at Quantum Metric.
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'm not trying to be a commercial for Glassdoor, but I would tell you, I look at Glassdoor before we sign a contract, and I don't want to do business with a company that their own team members don't like working there. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I love getting a perspective into a company from the actual inside. It's very unveiling of what the organization truly treasures.
You know what? We just launched our rebrand as you've seen. We spent 2 or 3 months interviewing all sorts of well-known companies, not well-known companies, and there was one that we interviewed in LA who seemed brilliant. Like, oh my god, like these people are brilliant. Look at the work they do. They had like a 1.8 on the glass door, and I called the founder when we were gonna tell him no, like no, and I told him why. I was like, dude, I
Yeah.
have to tell you this, brother.
Yep.
This is not a good look. I can't like how as much as we obsess over creating the best people experience for those at SADA, how can we ever have a partner
Yep.
who's a 1.8 or whatever they were? It's so funny you mentioned that because it's the first time that Glassdoor has killed a vendor
Yeah.
engagement with
Yeah.
us that I was involved with. But I agree with you. It's very much the birds of the feather philosophy. And you know what's interesting, Mario, is I think that when we were smaller, and probably you can kind of you've been small many times as you've started from the ground up. And for us, is maybe a little unique in that we never really had any funding, so we couldn't always pay up for market sort of and be an attractive place to work because we couldn't point to some funding round or whatever. I remember thinking the first 10, 12, 15 years of SADA that like, man, it's really hard to find great people. There are just not that many of them. And you know what it was actually? It was the fact that we didn't know ourselves. You know, the fit that you're talking about. Like we couldn't articulate what that fit was. A, B. We also, of course, just didn't have the size and the scale to be able to, pay, really good market rates and be a competitive place to work when we're competing for essentially a lot of the same talent as the biggest of companies. But now I've realized when you get those things right, there's a lot of good people out there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think some people might over rotate on experience and intelligence, and I love those, by the way. I'm not downplaying them, but what I found, it trumps it every time: passion, persistence, and integrity. And I have the lucky fortune of having the opportunity to work closely with John Chambers, the former CEO of Cisco, and he's been a great coach, mentor, and advisor. And I remember the first early conversations, how he just, Mario, focus on culture, focus on people, and like it's just, it sounds so obvious and it sounds so easy, but I'll tell you, I remember distinctly, early on as we built the company, I didn't know what it meant. I just didn't know what it meant. Now I know what it meant. It just sounds so
Right.
obvious, but conveying to the listeners to this podcast, I think about, you got to find, like you said, like who you are, and then repeat it in the DNA, in the culture of the team, and keep finding people. And it doesn't mean they should look the same. I love diversity, from all different perspectives, because it will bring, you don't get an echo chamber that way. And it will,
Right.
in history and time has, over and over, that diversity leads to greater success. But get people that have this common thread around, the passions of the people in the company, and it's transformative. John
Totally.
just coached over and over. It's like you've got to build, you got to get a way for the people to do the things that you would have done if you weren't there, like even when you're not there, like, and you what are those attributes that define you, as a team, as a company,
Yeah.
and then you can scale without you having to be part of all of it.
Yeah. And you know what? And I think there's nothing more of a test than a black swan global tragedy slash health crisis slash economic uncertainty period like we're going through still right now to kind of surface all those things like the cultural attributes of any company. You can't hide in the midst of a crisis.
Yeah.
Everything bad and good gets accentuated. So I don't know what you've seen, but I've been floored by, I think, what would otherwise be a big concern, which is, are people going to show up? Or people are like really stepped up, and I was just so incredibly proud. You probably experienced the same, but then the fears around, oh my god, are they going to burn out? How do we, balance them out? It's like
Yeah,
the other stuff to worry about.
I think the most fun part about the way that we work shift is that, you can, like, I happen to be, you happen to caught me in a day that I randomly was, stopping by the office. So, it's nice to have a fun background, but normally you get to see into people's homes, you get to see a little bit more of the character of who they are. You see their dogs, their cats, their children, their
Yeah,
partners, walking through the background saying hi. I think it's connected us in a more human way, than we've ever had in professionally in my work experience. So, it's not all bad. I mean, yes, like there's some terrible things and some terrible challenges that we have to overcome as an entire, class of people, of human beings. But what's exciting is that there are good changes that are happening because of it, and I'm thankful for that.
no, absolutely. To be in a position to um, help and serve our customers, our people. I remember like the extent that we had to convey flexibility in the first few months and people's, work, you know, work experience at home and childcare and health issues and our customers like payments and other things, like the flexibility, just to be in a position to help was, I think, is incredible. And and obviously the human toll is huge. At the same time, like, focusing on how we can help. Like, how can we help these companies then transform so they're not only surviving in the midst of this pandemic, but able to thrive because we're helping them pivot. And I think that's a great pivot to quantum metric in the product itself, and this concept of continuous product design, that you've really coined and brought to market. So, can you just tell the listeners what your company does, what the product does? That'd be awesome to hear just from the founder's mouth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Continuous product design is really a concept around like what made digital successes. Some in some cases they were digital natives, and if we think about a company like Netflix, I think Tony, you probably remember Netflix wasn't digital native. I used to
No.
get DVDs in the mail, right? The younger generations might only know Netflix as a digital company, but for us, and I still think they actually serve physical DVDs in the mail for some customers, but how do we get companies to look like the success of a Netflix, to look like the success of a Google, and others, Airbnb and others? And I think that's really what's embedded in continuous product design. If you look at someone like Eric Schmidt in 2014 shared with the world a presentation that this is why Google's successful. He talked about most enterprises optimize for minimizing risk, not freedom and speed. And so what you end up in that scenario is like a bunch of silos of data. And really, like the only person that had the purview were the people at the top that could make decisions. So you have this choke point, you have this slow iteration of product life cycle. And if you have an inertia of a really large enterprise, maybe you have a large physical presence, you've got 100,000 employees, it's really hard to compete with that. Like eventually you see those things topple, but it takes a long time to really slow that organization down. They've already got the momentum, but eventually they will lose unless they adapt. And what Eric shared was like, what Google did successfully was like, what if I empower my workforce to have the same data, the people at the top, they had the same visibility, and what really organizations have done for millennia is just it's a very simple thing is listen to your customer. Even Bezos talks about like this obsession with the customer, right? Eric Schmidt's talking about that same thing at Google. Obsess about the customer, get data about the customer into the hands of everyone on your team in real time, and now you can have this, you can maximize for speed, and you can maximize for the freedom of each individual who can contribute. It's not just one person's assets and knowledge and experience, but you're taking advantage of your entire organization's experiences and getting them to make decisions in real time. I went in and talked to a bank, and I said, nope, we listen to the customers, we obsess about them. I'm like, okay, how do you do that? And they said, well, we have surveys. I'm like, okay, tell me about the process. And they said once a month, and I said, stop right there. And but I actually let them continue. But in my mind, I'd stopped right there.
Yeah.
Once a month, they get together and go over surveys that customers have left them, survey responses, and it's like you listen to your customers once a month. Imagine the bank, the organization that listens to the customer every minute of the day,
Yeah.
and think about who will win. And what it comes out to be is like you don't have to be the smartest person in the world. You have to be the fastest person in the world.
Mm.
That's what makes companies most successful. Because at the end of the day, if you take 6 months to release something and you're the smartest person, but somebody else who might not be as fortune telling as you or predictive as you, but they iterate every minute, they keep experimenting every minute, they're going to crush you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Adaptability. It's very
exactly.
Darwinian. Yeah.
Exactly. And continuous product design is about, how do I tear down the silos? If you look at something like DevOps, something that you and I have been just a part of this journey for the last 20 years, think about the impact it made on an organization. But what part? The technology side, right? Between dev and ops. They removed the silo and accelerated the communication, the the data communication, and just the organization's functional success between dev and ops. But why do we stop in technology? What if we could take those same learnings and apply them across the business? And so if you ask a business who's responsible for delivering the product, for delivering a digital product or digital channel, it's much more than technology. So
Yeah.
there's dev and there's ops. Before developers develop, there's product. They're deciding and designing what to create. And then after ops delivers, you have to have someone listening, someone discovering how customers are engaging. That's typically voice of customer, call centers, et cetera. So if we can get this kind of data across product dev, ops, voice of customer, call center, analytics, executives. We get the same perspective across all these organizations. We can remove their little silos. And at the end of the day, customers don't call. And I think your database is not working well. It's or your network or your server. You're talking about my experience is not working.
Yeah.
And if we can get that kind of same perspective, what happened to the customer across the entire organization? They become a highly functioning team. They become massively successful. They can iterate at speed and at scale. And it turns out that's how companies succeed. That's what Eric Schmidt would talk about. What happened at Google? It's why Netflix releases 2,000 iterations of software a day, and it doesn't matter if you just release 2,000 things a day. They have to be 2,000 things that move the needle. And how do you
Right.
know what's going to move the needle? So getting
Yeah.
that data about how customers are interacting is how we become successful, and that's what continuous product design is about.
But then to go dig a little deeper on the technology side. How does it
Yeah.
actually work? Because I think that's some of the magic. A lot of the magic is like this process becomes invisible to the user. Because if you're just depending on like a proactive, I'm going to take 30 seconds and give you my feedback, you're only catching like the extreme cases of dissatisfaction, right? Or extreme cases of happiness or whatever in a way that you can't even action. But like, let's talk about the tech because the tech, again, I was like so impressed with when you demoed it to us. And I'm sure it's come a long way since the last time I really looked at it deeply.
It truly has. But yeah, I'll explain it in the way that my 13-year-old daughter like
Or
um, her friends ask her, so what is it that your dad does? And she says, well, have you ever gone to a website? And I think we work across many industries from banking and retail and insurance and telcos and airlines, but my daughter doesn't think about telcos, right, that much, but she does think about buying things online. So she explains it to her friends in the retail setting, and she says, have you ever gone to a website and try to buy something and the website doesn't work? And honestly, even at age 13, they're like, yeah. And they say, I hate that. I'm so frustrated. And then what do you do when it happens to you? Her friends say, I just leave. And she says, well, that's what my dad helps with. Now, her 13-year-old story stops there. I'll continue it. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, how many of the people had that same bad experience at that same part of the website on that same day? How much does it cost that business? And when you are the business, how do you find out about it? So what we do at Quantum is, it's funny, that same daughter, Tessa, it was her birthday a few months ago, and she's trying to buy, she wanted to get a new bed. I said, okay, let's go shop for a new bed. It was during the pandemic. It's a fun way to spend our time. Is there, it's turning 13, and we were shopping for a bed, and the funniest thing happened. She clicked add to cart, and the add to cart button didn't work. And you know what she did? And because we all do this, she
mm,
clicked it 5 times. She
yeah.
rage clicked
Oh,
the add to cart button, right?
yeah. I'll do that.
And then what we all do is we hit reload, and then we hit back, and then we hit forward. And so what we discovered at
Change the
Quantum,
browser. We do all
yeah,
sorts of weird, like, yeah.
yep, yeah. Close your browser, start it over again, right? And so what we discovered is, well, what if we look at people's behavior and we find some of these things that we all, exhibit when we're having a frustrating experience, and if we could use a petabyte scale analytics platform, we're going to talk about GCP in a minute, but if we can take an analytics system and build this data scientist knowledge about, you know, how much is it costing our business? We can obviously the identification, quantification, prioritization of these problems. We can then get teams to align on where they can make the biggest impact of the business. So we were able to use a massive scale compute to say, you know what, this issue costs us $15 million, in revenue. That issue costs you three, and this issue costs you one. So we can aggregate around behaviors, and then we can quantify it. Because what I hear from a lot of, especially in the early days of quantum, we have 1,000 problems. I don't need you to tell us about our problems. I already know about 1,000 problems. But what organizations lack was the ability to quantify the problem.
That's
Because
right.
I do have 1,000 problems. But which one should I go and
What do you work
address?
on first? Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, we
Yep.
all have limited, resources, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly the problem. I have limited resources. How do I focus the teams on having the biggest impact to the business? And
That's
so we
yeah,
deploy the technology side is, we deploy using JavaScript, so we can actually get up and running in the same day. Within the first 24 hours, almost every one of our customers has found millions or tens of millions of dollars in the first 24 hours. Why? Because it turns out running websites is actually really hard, and it's like death by 1,000 cuts. And yes, you knew about 1,000 issues, but you didn't know which ones were actually impacting your business, and you didn't work on those ones. You did the team kind of worked on them, maybe in a squeaky wheel approach. And so
exactly.
so
Yeah,
it's been great. And then from a native app experience, we can deploy via an SDK in iOS and Android.
yeah, because the mobile is, is a huge part of how people consume or engage in commerce. And even though your data probably shows desktop's making a little bit of a comeback in the midst of the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Honestly, I get to talk to lots of different executive leaders, and what happened for all of these businesses is that as we can all expect, we all personally moved our lives online, and it was just a massive shift of behavior of if we think about retail, obviously consumer behavior all moved to digital, in a matter of a few days. And so yeah, it was a big acceleration, big adoption. My 81-year-old mom shops online, banks online, purchases
Yeah.
groceries online. That was a big shift. And I don't think after this, after we get a vaccine, or after we start to solve this across the world, I don't think she's going to go back to banking in person. I think digital has taken 10 steps forward, and it's going to be massively here to stay.
That is exactly my hypothesis as well. And I realized it in my own family, early days. And we work with a lot of healthcare customers, early days. It took something like this to create I think, user experience of a different way of engaging, a grocery store or your doctor. But not that those methods weren't available before. It's just like you couldn't get over the hump of like, that's not going to be a good experience, right? But then this pandemic had forced those sort of new muscle memory and behavior to actually happen for the first time. And to your point, accelerated 5 or 10 years. You might have tried it 5 years from now. You tried it now, but that's not going back. Some of it might go back, but that behavior change is permanent. So I think that's when your customers, our joint customers, like it's really the onus is on them. Like they're not solving for the pandemic. They're solving for the future, right? Which is going to be more
Yeah.
and more digital, that we know. But they're really solving for all potential unknown versions of the future, because we're not going to know exactly what it is. What we do know is that most organizations were not operating in a posture that was ready for anything. And now that has to change. Like you have to be ready for anything.
I think two things happened. One, when digital was 10% of your business, people didn't care as much about what was happening on digital. Now that it's 90 to 100% of your business, all eyes. I've talked to an executive who said, yep, it was always, store sales, then product, and then it was e-com. That's the order in which we talked about it in our executive team. Now, when he walks in the room, everyone like hushes up and said, how's e-com, right? Like that's the number one thing that execs want to talk about
Yeah.
in these large enterprises, because that's where their business is. So I think there's that massive shift where it became, a larger part of the business. And I think the second part is, if it doesn't matter which industry you're in. I think, for example, the experiences that the best experiences that we've had, if you think about a digital experience that you've had that was fantastic, you sort of start to think about, well, everyone should have that bar. Just because you had a great retail experience, now when you're at a bank, you kind of say to yourself, like, I want a great experience in my banking app and my insurance app and my airline booking and so on and so forth. And you think about banks. I don't know about you, Tony. Have you had an experience on your banking app and said, "Wow, that was amazing. I loved my experience on my banking app"? And I think consumer demand and expectations are now saying, "I want that to be easy." And you're
Yeah.
getting small, nimble, digital-first companies to deliver on that, and larger enterprises are saying, "How do we do that?" And they all say to themselves,
Totally.
I don't have the DNA, I don't have the muscle memory." You said, "I don't have the muscle memory," and they're wondering to themselves, "How do I do that?" So I think much more about quantum, not as a analytics company, as a digital experience company, but how do we change the culture of an organization to have empathy around the customer and iterate to deliver those fantastically delightful experiences?
Yeah, I mean, there's cultural issues with that, and I think that's where the journey to Google Cloud is unique. It almost forces a culture shift for a lot of our customers. But the other side, as you mentioned, banking and travel was kind of funny and ironic about that is we're seeing now these bare metal to GCP projects like Oracle to GCP, and we've won a handful of those now. And what's interesting is that the banking apps, you could argue, have gotten marginally better, but it's a little bit of the lipstick on a pig scenario, just like with travel. And because the back end is essentially mainframe, there's only so much they can do, right? With sort of the webhooks and that layer and mobile SDKs and stuff. So there's a lot of work to do, I think, in the years ahead to enable like what why is Robinhood a much better app? Well, they don't have or SoFi
The
like they
legacy.
don't have
Yeah.
the AS400s, running there.
I think some of the challenges that happen is not only the legacy systems, but it's like you said, that DNA muscle memory. Like if you think about the early days of the pandemic, we had PPP loans came about, and I got
Yeah,
an email from my bank every day from the CEO of the bank saying, "Hey, we're going to be PPP loans will be up tomorrow." And every day I got that same, "Hey, sorry, we didn't quite get the application ready yet. It should be up tomorrow." 5 days in a row, I got that same email. And
yeah,
the challenge for banks, for example, is they just don't have that muscle memory of like, how do I iterate with speed? Like typically it's a 6 month to 12 project. They had like 6 days to get
yep,
this banking application. And at the same time, all the requirements were changing each day. And so how do you get them to have that visibility, to have that iteration with speed and scale? Because you think about it, the banks that got their applications out first got the mother load of those banks of those loans. And so if you can get your teams to operate with speed and scale, there's a lot more business and success to win. And so I think that's what most executive leaders are looking to do. They're like, I've talked to banking leaders. I said, what are your top challenges? This is like before the pandemic. They said two of the top three things were speed. How do I get my teams to iterate faster at speed and scale? And that's why we really put together, like we looked at our best customers, and here we saw continuous product design, this dissemination, this data democratization across the organization had such a massive impact. We had a conference in February before the pandemic, and 90% of our conference was talking about organizational design and culture and empathy around the customer, not analytics, but like how do I get my
right.
team to care about the customer? And from there, success kind of presents itself.
Yeah, yeah, totally. We're both in the business of we both serve a bunch of startups who are disruptive and fast with no legacy, and also a bunch of very traditional organizations in the enterprise who are dying to transform, like literally dying, because if they don't, like,
Yeah,
they will die, right? And
yeah,
and I have to say, I love serving both, but nothing makes me more proud. And I see some of the logos here. You have Alaska Airlines, Neiman Marcus. I want to talk about IHG. Nothing makes me more proud than helping actually a more established organization transform. Because I look at that and like you, like that's 100,000 jobs. That is
yeah.
like institutional distribution channels and all these things that are established. Like how can we help them while we're also helping all the startups trying to disrupt them, right?
Yeah, startups. I mean, honestly, like I remember the days, Quantum was 5, 10 people big. If you want to get my team aligned in a startup, call 5 people into a conference room. But when you're at a big enterprise, you can't call 100,000 people into the conference room. And while you can do maybe I don't know 100,000 on a Zoom, but but you can get people aligned at scale, but not every day. And so
Right.
we can use data to get that alignment. And the alignment that we really want is just, are our customers having great experiences? Are they happy with our interactions with them? We invest so much in call centers and surveys and all these different ways to get feedback from customers, but how do I do it in real time, and how do I get it without effort? And I think
Yeah.
that's what's exciting. So I do think that the larger enterprises, they're harder to transform and help them succeed. So that it's been a pleasure to work with the largest of enterprises across the world.
So you have a few logos on your website. I'm sure there's a bunch more. I'd love to hear a couple of customer stories that really stand out for you. That when you won, you're like yes, but more importantly, when you were deployed, like it was transformational for
Yeah, well, first of all, every win is yes. That's, I mean,
them.
you know what it's like to be in an enterprise that's rapidly growing. I feel great I love having that win feeling. But there's so many great stories. I remember early on, I was so focused on that yes, like feeling really great. But early on, we were working with a customer who said, Mario, I've been buying software for enterprises for 20 years. I have never had to get my CIO, my CMO, my CTO, my CPO in a room to decide on software. And you know what was in the back of my mind, Tony, was, did you sign it? Did you sign it? I mean, honestly, it's just like I'm so excited to to share that win feeling that I didn't quite have my good listening ears. And it took me a little bit of time to figure out what he was really saying when he said that. And it was, you're getting data across all of these different personas in the company, and it's valuable for them. So they're all weighing in on, is this something that they wanted to invest and work together on? So that was pretty cool. That just that story, because it's really come out. I will tell you, I've been working with one of the largest telcos here in the U.S. I was speaking with a chief digital officer recently, and he said to me, and I just, this made me just, it kind of gave me goosebumps. He's like, Mario, quantum metric is changing the culture of our organization. And I don't think that you can buy software that changes the culture of an organization, or else I would just sell it in magical pixie dust and stuff like that. I think it has to come from a top down, desire to change a culture, to change the organization, the way it works.
Yeah, there's no bigger compliment actually in both of those stories. One is where you had um, the C-suite, collaboratively together making a software decision. That's actually been, I think, traditionally what has been wrong with how enterprise software decisions are made, how it's purchased, how it's consumed. It's sort of, we've seen the ebbs and flows of like it's a complete IT top-down decision to, okay, now it's like line of business just buys software on their own, doesn't even talk to IT, but like you're able to bring those groups together. that's that's a formula for sustainable success, like in your implementation, because you have the stakeholders brought in, and the fact that you're interesting and important to all those stakeholders all together is a huge kudos, I think, to what the software does, but also the fact that you are changing culture. I think that's how we look at every engagement now. And part of the reason we chose Google Cloud to be all in with is because we saw over and over again that, generally speaking, the approach with Google Cloud, because sometimes it was actually the harder decision to make because it was easier to buy other stuff. It was purposeful, it was disruptive, and it was always deployed. Nobody bought it and didn't deploy it like some other enterprise software. But it more often than not, it resulted in culture change. So that's what we've seen in our customers, digital natives. Like, can I call you a digital native? I can, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Netflix is not,
Absolutely.
Metric is.
Yep. Absolutely.
But also the traditional engagements. But you are not that new, as in like you were born 2 years ago as a company. You've been around for long enough to have seen other clouds and made other choices.
Yep.
But you're very, very invested in Google Cloud now, and now we're more invested than ever on sort of our joint partnership and with Quantum Metric and Google Cloud. What led to the triangulation of this decision most recently to go bigger than ever with Google Cloud and the partnership there?
Yeah, so we're actually 100% in on Google Cloud, and I think the story about Google Cloud and why it's been such a great partnership, it really starts when we were the tiniest of specks in the landscape of digital natives, of software enablement platforms. And it was really interesting about Google was they were willing to invest in us. And we didn't, it wasn't a venture round or something like that. They did give us $100,000. Google for Startups is an incredible experience, but most importantly, we had access to some of Google's best talent. So they helped us with an access to incredible architects to help us architect our solution inside of GCP. I made the decision specifically not because of 100,000. In fact, every cloud has kind of an offering around the startup
Yeah,
space, but they're not all equal. Yeah, I mean, there might be some dollar amounts that could be equal, but I think what was most importantly is the access to talent that I just never saw that incredible investment in us. But more importantly, what was really critical for our decision making process is like you see all of these comparisons, and they're also skewed, and it drove me crazy. So I actually invested the time to do my own analysis around performance, CPU, network, memory. Most companies, they might not be aware of disk write IO because they're just not pushing the limit of disk IO. For
yeah,
us, it was massive. We get data from 650 million users around the world on a monthly basis, and petabytes and petabytes of data storage and query power, terabytes of network traffic on any given day. So it's massive scale compute. And so that performance metric, that performance aspect of clouds was critical for our success. Google absolutely blew competition away. I do think that you can get to some of the disk write IO speeds, for example, in other clouds, but I promise you, we would have been bankrupt to do it. The capacity that Google gave us at the price point that we had, it was absolutely apples and oranges compared to the marketplace. And so I actually ended up writing an article in Forbes, just like, hey, look, it was fact checked by a team at Forbes, because I was so tired of seeing kind of marketing materials about this cloud and that cloud's the same and different price points. I'm like, here's the facts, and it's just a better, less expensive cloud. And then to add on the layers of support from both architects. Every time I needed help from the cloud team at Google, they absolutely over delivered. It was massively incredible.
That's so nice to hear that. I mean, you're right. Not everybody runs up to that performance, requirements, and frankly, not every customer, especially in the traditional side, is making a truly engineering cost performance based decision. They're making a decision based on inertia or other agreements or political pressure, whatever it might be. But I've been saying for a couple of years now, because we see it over and over again, anybody who's purely making the cloud platform decision based on merit is choosing GCP every time. And it's great validation of the technology, but also the other elements that you described are actually the soft elements which make startups more comfortable. Even the enterprise, it takes more than the best product actually to win in enterprise software. And you know that better than anyone. It's not like the consumer world where there's zero switching costs and the barrier to entry, whatever. Like, you have to be much, much more than the best cloud to win market share.
I think it was actually exciting about having speaking to you and the relationship with Google is I think Google gets that you can sell compute and storage and all these other different services, but if you don't have a way to enable the team, if you don't have a partner like SADA that can be there every step of the way, that you can count on to make sure that you get the value that you placed into that commit, then it doesn't really matter. And I think C-level executives want that confidence of, it's not a, hey, thanks for signing the contract, I'll see you later, I'm on to the next contract. It's like, we have partners like SADA that will make sure that you're successful. They've been there, they know a playbook to take your teams and onboard them and get the value that we've kind of envisioned together. How do I get to that success? And I think that's where Google's really making great strides, is having a partnership with SADA, having this expansive team across the world to make sure that we deliver on the vision that we laid out together.
Yeah, no, I love the economic model of the business that we're in, because we're actually completely on the hook, Mario, to your success.
Yep.
It's like the work starts after you sign and we engage,
Yep.
that's what the next 3 to 5 years plus. It drives all the best incentives around the behavior that we all want together. And that's why it's almost like, I've been around for 20 years. So we've seen a lot of models, but it's like managed services, but on a much more intimate and bigger scale. Because that was the first thing we saw back in the early 2000s. I was like, oh, this aligns incentives in such a beautiful way. And I think this cloud managed services MSP model does precisely the same. We can't be successful unless Quantimetric is wildly successful. And we're literally on the hook for your success jointly with Google. And it's a beautiful model. And I think we're just kind of scratching the surface in terms of what's possible. And I know that you're more aligned than ever with Google's marketing horsepower and prowess and those relationships. So you're definitely pushing that on that as well. And you're really kind of the poster, one of the poster children of their sort of ISV go-to-market strategy. So I'm really excited to see how that's going to benefit your organization and our partnership over the next several years.
Yeah, it's actually had a massive impact into our success. Just working with so many of the Googlers, and just connecting with executives across the world. How can we deliver on their goals for this quarter, this year? It has had a massive impact into our trajectory. But I think the other thing to highlight of the relationship is the joint SATA Google Quantum relationship has been, every time I've had a need, like I needed to deliver on something for our mutual customers, Google has always stepped up to the plate. Like, let's talk to some product managers. Let's talk about some of the challenges that we have in the services that we have created, the product that we've created today. How can we do better? And I've actually seen scenarios where I came to Google on a Thursday or Friday. I said, I need this. And by Monday or Tuesday, it was executed. It was massive changes to product. massive scales. I need 100,000 CPUs in seconds, not minutes,
Wow.
because a customer needed to go solve a certain type of problem, and we needed just massive scale compute, and they delivered on it. It was just, a lot of people talk about cloud as a lift and shift opportunity, and that's just insane to me. I can save some nickels and some pennies by
Yeah.
moving to the cloud. I don't think that's why. I mean, it's great. It's great that you can save money by moving to the cloud, operational costs, et cetera. But I think what's really exciting about moving to cloud is the art of possibility. I mean, never in the lifetime that I've had have I had access to hundreds of thousands of CPUs that I could borrow for a second, a minute, or an hour. And I think about the world where we've had things like Hadoop and all these different data analysis systems, and you run a batch, and it takes you overnight, and then I
Yeah.
get my answer. And I'll tell you, if I run something at 6 p.m. and I wake up at 8 a.m. and I go look at the result, I almost forgot what question I was asking from the day
Right.
before. But if I
Yeah.
can ask a question, and it's the same amount of compute power, right? So whether I pay $1 to have it run all overnight, or $1 to have it execute really fast, but only for a couple seconds, I can iterate my questions more quickly and really just kind of keep that train of thought. And like the art of possibility in cloud, this is what I'm excited about. This is what's made a transformational impact to our business, is like, having that conversation with Google saying, hey, look, if you do this, it will make our business, our product, our offering better, and it will make our mutual customers deliver on their business value faster. It's been amazing, that journey where we can actually have that impact and make that change for our customer. And it's really that answering that art of possibility question. That's what I'm just absolutely excited and enamored, in the relationship, that we keep executing, along those paths and challenges.
Yeah. No, I mean, this new leadership team, last couple of years especially, they are not messing around. They're all incredible. You know many of them. You strategize with them. We work very closely with them. It's really fun being on this journey because of the market impact, the customer impact, really the technology. We had a choice. We could have went agnostic and multi-cloud or whatever, but we went all in with Google for many of the same reasons you're citing, in terms of quantum metrics decision. And I'm just really excited, and I'm really grateful for your partnership. I know we've introduced you. I think my field team has, like, to some couple of very, very strategic customers of ours already, and also because, like, we're very proud of what you're doing and we love your product. It's not a big ask for us. Like, yeah, of course we'll introduce you to so and so, and I love that about our partnership. As you know, I'm at your service. We're in this together, and I look forward to working with you for many years to come. And I really want to say thank you for being my guest on Cloud and Clear.
Tony, it's my pleasure. The relationship has been just absolutely above expectations. So just want to thank you, the entire SADA team. Obviously, our relationship with Google has it just continues to grow, and accelerate, and get better. So there's a deep thanks from our team. We wouldn't be as successful unless Google and SADA together helped make Quantum a better organization. So hats off, thank you, and appreciate your partnership and support, and the friendship too.
Great to have you, Mario. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear, and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.